Yeah, now normally is when we transition to video, but John's got some problems with his computer or Skype or both or updates or... Yeah, I don't really know what's going on. So I am here, and I'm Jason, and John will be joining us shortly. You'll probably hear him call in because that's kind of how it goes. Welcome to Soccer Down Here. The base has dropped. It has. Allegedly, on a Monday. It's an overreaction Monday. It is November 30th, and there's a lot to react to. There's a lot to potentially overreact to. Maybe underreact, maybe on par react. I feel like maybe I'm overreacting at criticism of the MLS Cup playoffs, and it was boring, was the general vibe last night in Columbus's win over Nashville. I don't think it was boring in the afternoon match with Orlando and New England, but maybe. Let us know what you think. You can tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. You can join us on the Twitch pitch, twitch.tv/SoccerDownHere. And you can also email us, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. Here's my overreaction of the day. Abby says it was boring last night. A bunch of people said it was boring last night. They're not there to entertain you. And I think it's not about if it's boring or not boring. That's not even the issue. It's not the goal. They didn't make a movie to try to entertain you for a couple of hours. Both teams are trying to stay alive in the playoffs. And I feel like the boring, entertaining conversation goes away once you get into the postseason. The entertainment, in a lot of times, it comes from the drama. It comes from the intensity of the match. It's not about 10 goals in the game. It's not about a 5-4 scoreline. Are you going to have some of those? Yes, and we've seen a couple of high-scoring games. But the importance outweighs the entertainment. And that's something that I don't know if the game really progresses a whole lot further if that can't be understood in this country. You know, there are meaningful games that are not going to be as entertaining as a random July 4-3 game between Atlanta and LAFC at Banc of California Stadium in the middle of the season. You know, there comes a time in the year where that's not what's on hand. And this is more, and I should probably be a little more clear here. My frustration is a little bit more on not the fan side, because you guys pay your money and spend your time however you want to spend your time. It's from some of the people who I think color the fans' perspectives. Well, this is boring. This doesn't matter. This isn't important. This, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a playoff game. One team's going home. Columbus and Nashville fans, I don't think, were bored during that match. And the game was about them. You know, let's be real here. The game is entertaining them. Now, we've had these conversations on the show, and I think it's important to clarify. In terms of teams playing an entertaining brand of soccer, it's very, very important in the regular season. I make no demands in the postseason that they should be playing, you know, wide open, attacking soccer, trying to get all these goals. It's important during the regular season, sure. You also have to win games, and there are teams who are not capable of playing that way. There just aren't. In the postseason, even more so. And I'll take it back to Atlanta United in 2018. Atlanta United in 2018 was not playing attacking soccer in the postseason. I don't think Atlanta United fans really cared, to be honest. I think they were thoroughly entertained. Now, they were scoring goals on breaks, but I think the game at Yankee Stadium, Atlanta United fans were entertained. That was not a textbook entertaining game. What made it entertaining? The occasion, the bounce back for Atlanta after a bad decision day loss, Tata Martino realized you couldn't play regular season soccer in the postseason. Now, a lot of people have said that Nashville's boring all year long. I would disagree, but Nashville is not going to be able to play a wide open game, period. They're not built that way yet. Will they be? We'll have to wait and see. Year one? No, they're not. And Columbus ended up doing the very smart thing. They wore them down. They had possession. They pinned them back deeper and deeper. They took away Nashville's counter opportunities. Hany Mukhtar did not have a big game, which was needed here. Randall Leao did not have a big game, which was needed here. I don't know. I guess my issue here ultimately is how you define entertainment. I was entertained because of the occasion. I was entertained knowing that one team's season, and in either case, it's either Nashville, their season ending after a very good year one, and I think they're going to be happy with their season, but maybe feeling like there was a little more on the table for them. Or it's a Columbus team that at different points in the year was looked at as a favorite and looked at as a team that was going to win MLS Cup, and I think they still are one of those teams now, especially after the moves in the East. One of those teams was going to go home. That adds drama. Drama can be entertaining. And I don't know, maybe it's just for some the only way you're entertained in the game is by goals. My question for that is, if you are a fan of other sports, are you entertained by a defensive battle in the NFL playoffs? Are you entertained by a low-scoring, tight defensive NBA playoff game? Are you entertained by a pitcher's duel in the MLB postseason? Are you entertained by a low-scoring hockey game in the postseason? The postseason has different expectations on it, in my opinion. And it should. Maybe I'm overreacting here. But that's where I'm at with it. That's my thoughts anyway. Okay. We're going to hang out for a second, and you're going to hear me try to get John on the line because allegedly his computer and everything is functioning, allegedly. And we're going to try this. This is not great radio or anything, but this is what you're going to hear right now as we try to get John connected. Thank you, Skype. And Mateo, the virtual producer. And allegedly, John will be joining here in the video at some point. This is all alleged. This is not Mateo's fault. Do not blame Mateo.
Oh, no.
He had nothing to do with it.
Nope, nothing at all. Nope, this is not on Mateo.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, not on Mateo. It's on Norton.
Okay, sure.
Ever since I downloaded their virus deal on both of the computers here in the office, it has slowed both of them down, and it has completely and totally just wiped everything out. And at 8:57 this morning, Skype decided it wanted to update. So that's...
Why did it take 20 minutes?
I don't know. It's a computer question. You're asking me a computer question?
No, it's not a computer question. Skype updating takes like 60 seconds tops.
Oh, I'm mashing buttons, and it's not giving me anything after 60 seconds or anything like that.
Mashing buttons probably isn't the good way to do that. People are yelling at you to get Norton off of there because it's very bad.
Yeah. I would be more than happy to. Because, yeah, it has slowed everything down on the computers. Like, I'll give you an example. On the laptop, I was trying to access Julia Poe's stuff from the Orlando Sentinel so I could talk about Orlando City. Completely and totally locked the screen up. Please, everyone who is listening or is on the Twitch pitch, if you've had the same shared experiences, please let me know to make sure that I'm not on an island.
I have one positive vote for Norton 360 and a lot of negative votes against Norton.
Good. Cool. Good to know. But, yeah, so I've been basically screaming at my computer for the last 20 minutes.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it's like, it's not like it's not like I've been doing something for the last 4 years at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's like, I got stuff to do. You're slowing me down. It's not helping.
But they are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook.
I ain't letting this computer off the hook. When was the last time you yelled at an inanimate object?
You obviously haven't been around me when I've been watching a soccer game and yelling at TVs. That's like every day.
Well, but I mean, like, not something where like that, but I mean like a piece of equipment that's not working or something like that. Not like a television event where we're watching a game or something like that, but something that involves something other than that, like a piece of hardware that's not doing what you want it to do.
I can't think of the last time, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, that's about right.
You need a tech consulting firm, Sean tells you.
All right. I'm not disputing anything, and the more votes, that'll be my poll of the day. Norton 360, yay or nay? That's my poll of the day in the Twitch pitch.
Domer says, does yelling at yourself after drinking too much whiskey count? You could be an inanimate object.
True. Yeah, I mean, if you're slumped onto a sofa, then you have no impetus to move at that point. I could see that. Oh, happy Mate Day.
Happy Mate Day as I drink a Red Bull. What?
Mm-hmm. Apparently today's International Mate Day.
I'll have mate this afternoon then. I did not know that.
Yeah. I'm trying to see. It was in the timeline. Somewhere in our timeline. Yes. Patrick Sullivan. Happy National Mate Day to the entire Soccer Down Here crew for an Overreaction Monday. And he has a link to PatagoniaSpanish.school for the Mate Day.
Very cool. I will have some mate after I have my Red Bull after the show. Jarrett verifies about me yelling at things, especially soccer games.
Yeah.
As you guys haven't heard me on the radio, I kind of dial it down a little bit maybe there. Sometimes, not all the time. Jarrett was in the booth with us watching the U.S. Open Cup final, which we were not able to broadcast, and he says he was scared for his life. That might be a little bit of an exaggeration or an overreaction, a little bit. But yeah, there were some things yelled out a window very loudly. It's true. All right. My opening statement was about entertainment value and about how playoffs are different, and the entertainment value from the postseason should be looked at differently. At least in my opinion, it should. It's a different situation entirely. I've been entertained by all the games in different ways. I was entertained here regardless of what happened on the field because somebody's going home, and that's drama, and that you have the intensity of the match. It wasn't both teams sitting back and doing nothing. It was both teams in some ways canceling each other out in the Columbus-Nashville game, but ultimately Columbus pushed Nashville deeper and deeper and deeper and prevented them from getting out on the break, which is where Nashville could be dangerous. Nashville also wasn't as good out on the break. They had chances to win. They couldn't convert. The Crew ended up with 2 goals in extra time after wearing Nashville down. And you got to give Columbus a ton of credit. They had 7 positives. Their training was completely wrecked. And Caleb Porter talked a little bit about it after the match. He said, I've never had a week like this in my life, in my coaching career. But we've had some moments this year that were similar. So I think the mentality of the team, I just can't say enough about this group, how resilient they are, how they're able to adapt, how they're able to just keep focused, and I've never been more proud of a group. He said, I knew it wouldn't be perfect today because we didn't even touch a ball for 2 days last week. Didn't even touch a ball. And the only prep day we had was the day before the game, and it's difficult to do much on that day. We knew tactically they'd be ready. It'd be no surprises from what we have to do, but when you don't get reps, then it's not going to be as clean, cohesive, and sharp. So add that to the factors with, I guess the game didn't live up to some entertainment value standard. And yeah, it was tough. And Columbus ended up kind of having to find their way in the match, and they did. And they were the better team. Nashville, this doesn't mean anything about Nashville. I think some people have taken it as a referendum on them again now after that referendum had changed with 2 wins. I saw Nashville people saying that this was the best expansion year, and we'll leave Chicago out of it because that's so different. It's hard to argue that. They were a lower seed than Atlanta, than Seattle, I believe, in their first year. But they were a better defensive team than both of those teams. They won 2 playoff games, which neither one of those teams did, and both with clean sheets in the postseason, and lost in the conference semifinal in extra time. I'm not going to argue against Nashville having the best expansion year in league history. I'm not going to argue against it. It was that good. They still have room for improvement. They still have to get better. They have to be more dangerous going forward. Yonder Cadiz for a whole season should do that. If it doesn't, they're going to have to solve that issue. But I think Nashville came in and showed there's a different way to launching a league. Now, Mazzano throws something in, and I want to get into this because this is where I was wondering if this would go. So Mazzano says, to the root of the issue, not disputing your point, but professional sports were organized to entertain spectators. But each spectator's subjective opinion on what is entertaining is varying. But when the stakes are higher, as they are in the playoffs, the entertainment value is increased. I think the base entertainment value is, which can overcome a game that maybe in the middle of July isn't that appealing.
Yeah.
But Columbus and Nashville are not playing to entertain you in Atlanta or you in St. Louis or you in Seattle. They're playing for their fans. I think their fans were on the edge of their seats during this match because it meant something. My frustration isn't so much neutral fans saying they weren't entertained. If you're not entertained, then don't watch the game. Ultimately, the league needs to be more entertaining. My issue is more with people who talk about the game on a regular basis saying it was boring. It's just not. To me, it's not, and maybe I'm the weird one. And if that's the case, that's fine. I think when games have more meaning, they need to be portrayed as such.
Yeah.
And like Mazzano says, the entertainment value is increased in the playoffs. These are do-or-die games. It's survive or advance. Like Gary Smith can't go into the game worrying about what the fans in Orlando are thinking of his team's game. He doesn't care. He's trying to find a way to keep playing next week. Period. That's the job. And if you come in, the whole argument about the 1-0 win, 4-3 win, in the postseason doesn't matter what the number is. It's just win. It's just survive. It's draw and win on penalties. It's whatever. It's get through. It's just this idea that these teams are supposed to come out and go gung-ho, wide open, because that's the only way the game is entertaining. No, I thoroughly disagree with that.
Yeah,
I thought it was a very interesting match. So, yeah, that's fine. If I'm the weird one here, that's cool. I don't think it helps anything when you have people with influence saying this was a crap game. And why was it a crap game is what I would like to know. Is it because there wasn't enough goals in it? Well, then there's a lot of crap games. And do you feel that way about a World Cup final? Do you feel that way about an FA Cup final? Do you feel that way about a big game between the top 2 teams in Spain and it's a 1-0 game or a scoreless draw? Is it crap? No, I don't think it's looked at as crap. So we need to stop looking at MLS as crap because it's MLS. Like, that's a mentality that's got to stop. It was very important to both teams. It was very important to their fan bases. And to say it was garbage is very disrespectful, in my opinion.
No, I'm right there with you. I thought that the game last night with Columbus and Nashville, for me, it was entertaining because of what was at stake. And for me, I'm looking, that to me is the plot here of this particular 2-hour plus block of television that we're looking at here. It is survive and advance. It is, okay, what are these teams going to do so they can continue to play? And for me, I was completely and totally locked into this game last night because of understanding what was on the line here. So, I like you, I guess I'm weird in this resolve that I was enjoying what I was seeing. I was entertained last night because I knew what was going on. I knew what was at stake. And for me, you don't have to be 5-4, 6-5, whatever. It doesn't have to be FIFA 21 for me to be totally locked into something and understand its quote-unquote entertainment value for a particular sport and a particular product on television. I understood what was going on and the urgency that these two teams wanted to have out there so they could advance. I mean, I don't know what else you really could ask for in an entertaining game like that. Obviously, folks will sit there and say, "Oh, more goals." But I mean, from a baseline understanding of entertainment value, the game last night, to me, was entertaining.
If goals are the only entertaining point about the game for you, you're going to be bored a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be bored by a lot of players. And I don't know what to tell you. That's just how it'll be. Questions on the Twitch pitch. Jason Nick says, was the ESPN audio dropping out due to bleeping people, or was it just audio issues? Was happening all night? It was bleeping.
Yeah.
There was lots of salty language. I know Gary Smith was involved in some of it. I think Caleb Porter was involved in some of it as well. But yeah, it was bleeping. I'm a little surprised they haven't resolved that situation a little bit better, where at least they don't lose the main announcers.
Yeah.
If they drop all the sound from the venue, okay. If that's the only way you can do it, fine. But like it's at one point, it was kind of a shame because this was Adrian Healy's last regular game for ESPN. He's going to be the voice of Austin FC going forward, and he was talking about enjoying working with Alejandro for so long and going into that, and it bleeps out. And it's like, man, he's kind of having an emotional point here, and it's just completely cut out.
Yeah.
They got to figure that out going forward because it just doesn't work to drop all the audio entirely. Like, can't you separate the tracks, I would think?
Yeah, I would think that you could. And
can't you pot one down and pot the other one?
Yeah, you'd like to think that you could split what you're getting from site, which is coming in separately from where you are. It's like sound from venue to Bristol. Bristol is Bristol. You would think that you could isolate that track and sit there and just dump it and just sit there and pot it down for however many seconds, then bring it back up, and you would still have the conversation.
See, I just dumped John, and you could still hear me. So, I mean, there you go. I didn't know what John was saying. I might have had to go blurry face on him, but,
Blue dot?
Yeah, I mean, I can dump John and keep talking. So, I don't know. It's weird.
So I don't know, and this is production questions down here, but I don't know what it takes in this current setup for a network that is bringing in an audio feed from a separate location. And this is something that's happened as far back as MLS is back.
Yeah, which was the same setup. I mean, the setup is different than normal, which I get. I mean, you have audio and video coming from a source into Bristol. You have the announcers in Bristol calling it there. But couldn't you have two audio tracks?
Yeah, you'd think.
I don't understand it. Two audio inputs? I don't know.
Yeah.
Next week. I think it's on Fox, actually. I think FS1's got the Eastern Conference Final. No, they don't. ABC does. Sorry. They're going to have to figure it out because Bruce Arena and Caleb Porter on the touchline.
Oh.
Yeah, you're going to be dropping audio the whole time. It's going to be bad. Burned, talking about entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. Says the issue is single game knockout format combined with very strong parity between the teams. At a World Cup, there's also defensive soccer, but usually a bigger differential between the teams in quality, which can make it more entertaining. Yeah, I mean, sure. I think it's any single game situation, you're going to get teams that are going to be careful not to lose. I mean, you don't want to end your tournament or end your season. There's nothing around that. You've had some games here that have had some differences in quality. This was one that I think people might have told you there was a difference in quality. I would argue that I think the game kind of showed that Nashville can compete at this level, but they didn't have enough going forward ultimately. And it felt like one team was kind of chipping away and chipping away and chipping away and chipping away, and it just pinned Nashville deeper and deeper and deeper. And ultimately, it's one moment where Romney and Zimmerman both kind of get caught far away from goal. Romney's already out, and he has to make a decision. I thought Glenn Davis pointed this out really well on Twitter. He has to make a decision based on where he is. He decides to kind of hold his ground in no man's land, And Zelarayan's able to play the ball down the line to Zardes, and that opened everything up because Zimmerman was also high up the field. So your back line gets pulled out one time, and it changed everything, and that's ultimately what did you in. That's the margin that a team like Nashville had because they don't score a lot of goals. We talked about it all year with Atlanta. Like one defensive mistake can end it for you because you're not scoring much. You don't have that backup of, okay, we gave up a goal, but we can go find two. We gave up a goal, and we're not scoring at all, so we're dead. And you give up a second because you're having to throw everybody forward. So it's the single-game knockout can be good in some cases, and it has been good for MLS in the most part, but it can lead to games that are cagier, that are more tactical, that are situations like this where there's kind of a little bit of canceling one another out. For me, that's still entertaining because of what's on the line. That's the big thing. But if you're a fan and you don't care about either one of those teams, I get it. Yeah. It's this idea that the experts are saying it's a garbage game, and then that makes its way to the fan bases, and it's like, it's not a garbage game. No. It's a tight game. It's an intense game. It's a difficult game for either team to get an advantage. These are real things, and it's an important game. And I think that's the part that gets left out of it. That makes it entertaining for me.
Yeah.
I'm always going to watch a game that matters more than a game that doesn't. Whether it's, if it's a regular season game, I'm going to watch a game that means something more for the table. If it's and I'm watching random teams here. If I'm watching random teams, I'm going to watch a game that means something. If it's in the summer, I'm going to watch a game that matters from a league that's playing games that count as opposed to friendlies. I don't care about games that don't matter. Like, yay, it might be 5-4. Yippee. It doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
And goals don't mean it's good either. It's just, anyway, it's this idea that it's the playoffs, but it has to be entertaining, and that's all that matters. And I disagree with that. It's the playoffs, and it matters because it's the playoffs.
Yes.
They have to be the ultimate thing. That's the way the league is structured. That's it. The playoffs mean everything. And I'm sure it meant everything to these teams playing yesterday. You could see what it meant to Orlando. I mean, they were losing their minds over it.
Yeah.
And, yes, it obviously meant a lot. You could hear what it meant to Orlando fans. It had that backing track. And maybe that was something that was missing from the Columbus game. Maybe that would have changed the feel for it. If you had the Columbus fans in there as the game was tight and tense, yelling their heads off, trying to urge their team on, maybe it has a different feel. Maybe you're not bored by it at that point. But I think you saw in the afternoon match how important it was to the two teams. And ultimately, New England was the better team. And we talked about it on our pop-up show last night. Orlando has to get over this hurdle of emotional immaturity. And it's not new. Pareja didn't bring it. It was there back in 2018 under Jason Kreis when the team fell apart on a winning streak when they lost to Atlanta. The fans threw everything they could on the field. That was 2018. It hasn't changed. And it's an issue. And Nani is an issue at this point, in my opinion, because he's the focal point of that team. He can't act the way that he does on the field because then everybody feeds off of it. There's nothing to argue about with the way that the last two games were called for Orlando, in my opinion. And it sounds like they still had issues with being frustrated about the last game, which is mind-blowing to me. Again, You're in the playoffs. Nothing else matters. Huon should have been sent off before he was sent off. Galese had to be sent off because there's no other way around it. Yesterday, Pereira has to be sent off because that's a horrendous tackle. I mean, absolutely awful tackle. It's not like him either. It's just an awful tackle. Mm-hmm. Or there should have been maybe one more send-off, and it would have been Nani for me for grabbing the referee because he was already on a yellow. I think the referee did the best he could to not let the game get completely out of hand, but Orlando was determined to make it get out of hand, and that's on them. And it distracted them from actually winning the game. And that's the biggest problem, is you can't come in frustrated about previous games and calls. You can't come in already thinking everything's going to go against you. And from Nani's quotes, it kind of sounded that way. You can't have that mentality because then you can't win. And ultimately, New England was the better team on the day, regardless of the red card to Pereira. New England was a better team. They advanced. They showed more emotional maturity. And Orlando's got a lot of questions to answer going into 21.
Yeah, Oscar Pareja yesterday to Julia Poe, post-match, Orlando Sentinel says, we're proud of them. I'm backing them up all the time. Today was another moment where we lost our head. I want to be responsible for that. This is something that cannot happen. But it has continued to happen. For me, I thought Nani should have, I thought Nani was orange, if not red, for all of his contact with Chilowitz, because I remember a moment in the first half where Nani was basically in Chilowitz's face. And if I remember my lip reading class, Alex Chilowitz said, I'm done with you. I'm done. And then he gave the no more sign with his hands. And I thought that Junior Urso was just as much on an orange, especially with him going after Chilowitz in the second half as well. So it could have been any other number of folks that, for me, if I was more of a hair trigger than Chilowitz was yesterday, probably would have been sent off. And I know that as a center ref, you don't want to do that in a game that's this important. And so I understand the why for not sending folks off. But to see all of these different folks who were not wearing a captain's armband in Chilowitz's face, going after him, yelling in his ear, chirping at him for moments that were either fouls or cards or reds, it's something that we've continued to see from Orlando. It's something that has not changed. And, if Nani is acting this way, that rubs off on folks. I mean, Daryl DK was also in officials. He was also in Chilowitz's face, I think, at one point in the second half. So it rubs off on folks. And you have this entire idea of, okay, well, if he does it, then I should be able to do it too. And then you continue to do it, and it just continues to snowball as something, as a philosophy. And it's not the way to go about things.
It doesn't help you win the game, and that's the important thing. I mean, I don't care less about how it comes off to other people. It doesn't help you win. It affects your mentality in winning the actual game in front of you, and it's a distraction. It's something that they have to get better at going forward. They absolutely have to. Soccer for Good OG says, the Columbus-Nashville game was mildly deja vu from the match with Atlanta. Don't remember all the details, but I remember a scoreless draw goes with Columbus in the postseason, being on the edge of my seat. That was one of the best scoreless draws that I've ever seen, the Atlanta-Columbus one in 2017, where both teams had a number of chances. You just couldn't find a breakthrough. And it goes to extra time, and both teams got tired, but there were still a few chances there. Parkhurst clears one off the line. It goes to penalties. It was a very entertaining game. I would think, for people even who had nothing to do with Atlanta and Columbus. You also had about 70,000 people screaming their heads off, which does help, and it does make a difference. And I think we see that a little bit more now that we're starting to see some fans in buildings and the effects of it versus games with no one. And you're starting to see, okay, the fans are very, very important in the building for the entertainment value. And that was maybe one of the big issues with last night. Let's see. Chris Mueller was super upset after the game. J-Dub says, yeah, he was breaking down afterwards. I think a couple teammates had to go over to him and kind of help him get it together, getting off the field. He struggled down the stretch. And it's hard for young players to be consistent from game 1 to game 35 or 40 or however many you're playing. It's tough, and he trailed off after a really good start. I'll be curious to see if he gets called into the national team camp. I'd like to see him called in. Be a good reward for him. I think it'd be a good kind of spark for him going into next year that, hey, he's in the mix. He's in the picture. He got that opportunity. I'd like to see him called up and maybe play in Fort Lauderdale against El Salvador. Him and Daryl DK would be the two from Orlando that I would like to see get call-ups and potentially be there. From Nashville, Walker Zimmerman, I think has to be one, in my opinion. Depends on what you're doing with the camp. I mean, Dax McCarty, and I tweeted about him last night. I still think he's one of the best holding midfielders in this league's history, and he's still one of the best in the league today. Is he capable of playing in that game? Absolutely. There's no question about it. But is he going to help you being there as part of your preparation for 22? Probably not. Unless you have a young player that you want to bring in as a holding midfielder and you want to play them with McCarty. Something like that. I don't know if that's the case. Zimmerman would be the main one that I would be calling up in that from Nashville. So Mueller, DK, and Zimmerman could get call-ups now that they're out of the postseason. I think that's supposed to come out tomorrow, so stay tuned on that. That game will be December 9th. If you missed it, over the weekend, Joe Patrick of Dirty South Soccer reported that, according to his sources, George Bello will be part of that call-up list. We have not seen the list officially yet, so we're waiting to see what happens with that. Other things from the Twitch pitch, lots of conversation about announcers and how they affect it, and they absolutely do. And this is something that, I talked about, and John and I talked about it with Two's games, and Mike and I talked about it with first team games, and Kevin and I talked about it the time I did a game with them. Like, when there's not fans in the building, it feels like almost our role changes a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I definitely tried to capture whatever emotion was in the game because you weren't getting the emotional response from fans.
Yeah.
So it's trying to capture the emotion and the feel of it, because normally when you watch or listen to a game, you get a sense of that with the rise and fall of the crowd noise and how they react at moments. So I feel like our jobs are different right now without fans in the building, and we have to adjust and deal with it. It's hard because it's a very different way of thinking about the game. I think for radio, it's easier because we're going the whole time, and we're filling space anyway, and now it's just like we're trying to fill space where the crowd would be. TV, it's harder because it's very different. It's a different medium. It's a different format. It's a different mentality because a lot of times you want to let the pictures tell the story, but if the pictures have no sound behind them that you normally have, are they telling the story? And that's right. the hard part here. It's very difficult. Okay, lots of different stuff in the Twitch pitch. We have any tweets we need to get to?
Yeah, we've got some that have gone over the topics this morning. Turner Kirby, after the matches last night, says, by the time you read this, it'll be 12 hours past match. And in Orlando City just picked up another red card.
Yes, they did. Or they will, and they will again, and they will again, and they will again, and they're probably complaining and crowding the referee as well. Yeah. It's just got to stop. It's not. You don't see top teams act that way, and Orlando has the potential to be a top team. You look at how they finished the season; they were a very, very good team, but they're not acting like it. There's that thing that people always say, like act like you've been there. Like that gets overused a little bit, but there is a different expectation in how you react to moments if you're a top team. You can't do what Nani's doing. Nani's been everywhere in the world in this game. He knows better. And I don't know if it's just he doesn't respect the referees in this league, which, hey, that's a valid question. And if that just comes out this way, but it's becoming counterproductive. It's hurting them. And it's something that they've got to figure out going forward, or they're going to be in the situation every time things get difficult, they're going to fall apart. And they're too good to be doing that.
Turner also says that looking at the situation with the Broncos and with Columbus, and he says different situations, I know.
Yeah.
Leagues in the future need to figure out a way to test out of contact tracing. I don't know if there is one right now in MLS, but there's got to be a point where it's like, okay, this guy probably doesn't have it, and it not be 10 to 14 days later, as contact tracing is what has hurt a good bit of these games and will really hurt basketball as one positive shuts down programs, which makes it impossible to finish.
Well, it's very different because I think MLS is not using contact tracing to rule people out. They are testing everybody to rule people in or out. The other sports are too, but they're using contact tracing, and I think college is, because college isn't testing at the same level. College sports in general are not testing at the same level that MLS is.
Right.
So college sports, a lot of times you're getting contact tracing come into play. I know with college soccer it did. I know it had an effect on the Sun Belt semifinals that I called. Players were ruled out due to contact tracing. A roommate tested positive, and none of the players ever tested positive, but they were ruled out because of contact tracing. I have not heard that be the case in Major League Soccer. The way it has been discussed in MLS has been player tests positive, he's removed from the group, everybody then tests again, along with that player who tested positive. They're removed upon the first positive. It's confirmed with a second positive, and then they are put completely separate from the group. If you have any other positives within the team, then they are removed as they test positive. The Broncos had an issue, and it was coming up while I was on Friday on 92.9, and I was kind of following this as it was happening. You had a backup quarterback test positive or be a close contact to go onto the COVID list, and that was on Thursday. Well, that player went onto the list, but they didn't do the follow-up testing, and they didn't stop practice because the player rep for the union, one of the kickers, I think Brandon McManus, tweeted out, like, well, why did we still practice? Like, there has to be consistency here. And then I believe you had more positive tests afterwards. It wasn't just contact tracing, but you had actual positive tests that became an issue. There's not consistency in the way these things are handled. And I don't know if there will be from sport to sport, but absolutely right when it comes to college basketball, because if they're not testing daily or every other day, or they don't trust the amount of testing they're doing, then contact tracing is going to rule players out. And it's one thing when you're dealing with 70, 80 players, you can have enough to play. It's another when you're dealing with 15 and you don't have enough to play. And you're going to have games where you have 6 people or 7 people, and they're not going to play those. College basketball is going to be a real challenge. The NBA, I'll be curious to see what they do. Maybe they test every day. And if they test every day, then yes, you might have what we've seen in MLS. And Colorado, I think, is going to be a question as to what happened with them. But let's take Columbus, for example. You saw 4 tests, I think, or 5 tests first, and then there were a couple more that tested positive. But you didn't have this whole stash of players ruled out because of close contact. Also, I would assume that the way they're training, and from what Caleb Porter said, they're then reacting because they can't train the same way because they've had a positive, so they have to get everybody else cleared first before they get the all clear to go back to train. Where I feel like it spreads is when you have a positive, you don't change the way that you're practicing, you haven't caught all the positives yet, and then it spreads in a team. And then you're like, oh, well, what did we do? Well, you didn't stop when you had a positive. You just kept going, and you didn't catch them all. And it spread. That's just bad planning.
Yeah.
College basketball, the NBA, are going to have to learn from what the other sports have done and make it work for their scenario. I think it's daily testing to be safe to do it, or you're going to play less games if you test less. It's something they're going to have to sort out, and we'll see what they do.
Yeah. Daniel Price is in this morning. He says his thoughts on the MLS playoffs thus far. This bracket challenge stinks, and I didn't want to win that SDH swag bag anyways.
I haven't checked it. I need to check the list because, man, the stuff has been nuts. The games have been all over the place, so I don't know what the brackets are looking like. Let me see if I can pull that up real fast. Okay. I'm a little bit faster than John with his Skype. It doesn't take me 20 minutes to upload it.
No.
My picks are blown up, so we're not even going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Eric will be back is leading right now, but level on points with Papa Smurf, Sharif, and C-Train, Caleb, all on 85.
Oh, wow.
Then there are 4 on 75. So you got a 3-way tie at the beginning. We got 2 conference semifinals out west, 2 finals, and then MLS Cup final. So 5 games left to separate this crew.
Do I even dare ask where I am in all this, considering that my East blew up?
Well, mine did too. I mean, I got to hit the load more button to find both of us, and it's not wanting to load more. So, yeah, that happens, John. That's part of how this goes. It's not that crazy. Philadelphia should have won.
Yeah.
They didn't. I banked on them to win. They didn't.
Yeah.
That's the game.
Mm-hmm. Kevin from Charlotte has a chance to. He's listening live for the first time in a while, so good to hear you, Kevin. And he says when we were talking about entertainment value with Nashville and Columbus, he says it wasn't the funnest game for the casual viewer, but I watched through the end. Not every game can be Atlanta United versus Crew in 2017.
Absolutely. I mean, every game's different. Every matchup's different. It's just, for me, the importance of the occasion has to count for something. And maybe it's on the league, maybe it's on the broadcast partners, the media partners. I don't know. But I think that story has to be told better, so it does mean more.
Yeah.
Like, it's the playoffs. The NFL playoffs, if it's a 14 to 10 win for somebody and it's a defensive struggle, people aren't complaining about entertainment value. It's accepted. Like, okay, this is a big deal. The NBA playoffs, it's a big deal. Like, this should be a big deal. This is what decides your champion. So if it's a tight game, that's what you, I think, would expect, to be perfectly honest. So, I don't know. J-Dub talking about testing, sorry. He says the top college football programs, Alabama's testing every day. They've had no breakouts except for Saban. I don't think all the college football programs are testing every day. I don't even think all the big ones are. At least they weren't earlier in the season. Now, that could have changed. I think Clemson was testing once a week at one point. I think LSU was testing once a week at one point, and those are two that have had some issues, so I guess it's not really a surprise. NCAA is difficult because you don't have one person in charge. You don't have somebody driving the bus here.
Yeah.
And every school is doing it different. Every conference is doing it different. That doesn't create any kind of good feelings about how they're going to manage the stuff.
No, it has been since schools came back for college football. I mean, you had Houston doing it one way, SMU doing it another way. You had Group of 5 schools doing it a third way. Power 5 schools individually were doing it differently. Yeah, there's no uniform message coming out of Indianapolis and the NCAA headquarters. It pretty much is, okay, well, we'll do it this way, we'll do it this way, we'll do it this way, and there's no commonality in all of it.
Yeah, and that doesn't really lend itself to playing games out of conference very much,
No.
if you don't have a good feeling about how a team's handling it. And again, you're not seeing spread in games, but I know it's still a concern. If I'm playing a team from a conference that I don't feel like is handling things well, I'm telling my players, I don't want to see you hanging around guys from the other team before or after the game. Say from a distance hello and move on. Like, I don't want you around them any more than you have to be. It's sad that you got to think that way, but there's some programs that just aren't doing a good job with this. And you have to be able to do this safely. You're putting more people at risk by not doing it correctly. We don't know the situation with Columbus. We don't know what happened there. We don't know what happened with Colorado. We don't know what happened with Nashville and Dallas earlier in the season. Those are the outbreaks that we've seen in this league. It'd be nice to know how it went wrong. So, and I'd hope that at least internally teams know this, so they've been able to maybe modify their own behaviors. You're going to have positive tests in every sport. It's just the way everything is right now. It's just in the community. I think it's very hard to completely limit everything unless you're in a bubble situation. And these teams don't want to be in a bubble situation 24/7. I understand that. So you've got to do all of your protocols correctly with the way you train and limit those moments where you could spread it within your team, because you're going to be around your fellow goalkeepers or your fellow defenders more in a training situation than you're going to be around players from another team in a game. The likelihood of spread is far more internal than external. So, Winter Wind, a lot of conversation about broadcast in the Twitch pitch. Yep. Said one interesting thing I found this year watching more MLS matches on ESPN Plus is that I'm enjoying them more with the local announced teams than the national teams. The homer bias really doesn't bother me, except when it's for the team that I'm not rooting for, because they've got the team knowledge and their emotion comes through. I do the same a lot of times. Like I will, I'll even do it with a game that is on national. Like I'll pull up the radio call from one of the teams, especially if it's a crew that I've heard a good bit or know a little bit, and I want to hear how they do it. I listened to Nashville's radio crew quite a few times. Listened to Portland, especially when it's a national game, and Jake Ziven goes over to radio. I think he's one of the best in the league. I obviously I like games on the radio, so I like the radio style call, but I think Winter makes a point, like you just have a different connection and the passion is there, and even if it's, passion for the team that you're rooting against, the passion's still there, and that adds to a broadcast. But they're going to know more about the individual team, especially at least one of them, they should anyway, than a national would. And that's okay. Like that, it's two different things. The emotion is the biggest thing, and that's, I guess, the thing that I get hung up on at times when I watch games from all over the world and watch games all over the country is I want the emotion of the game from the announcers. Like that's a big part of the experience for me. It's why I love watching games from Argentina, because it's a different feel. I think they really tap into the emotion. The emotion is central in a broadcast. If you watched games this weekend from Argentina, I mean, announcers were telling their stories about Diego Maradona, and especially in the pregame intro, and like there was a lot of sadness. The Boca game last night, and I saw Bernd said he wasn't able to watch it on Fanatis. I don't know what was up with that, Bernd, because I was watching it on Fanatis.
Yeah, I was watching it on Fanatis too.
I don't know what was going on. But, I mean, that was maybe the most emotional situation, and this is a different kind of emotion than just a regular game, that I've seen with Dalma Maradona, Diego's oldest daughter, in his box at La Bombonera. And after the first goal, the team went over and applauded her. And, I mean, she broke down in tears. And then after the game, they went over to applaud her, and you could see how much it meant. I mean, she's a huge Boca Juniors fan. She's been in that box watching games with her dad since she was a little girl. Like that emotion, it was weird to watch that and watch how the world feed from the Napoli game talked about it and talked about the emotion, and how here it was kind of just a secondary thing. But that carries over to games in the way that they're called. In Argentina, like, announcers will lose their minds in games, and it's accepted and it's okay. It's different even from Mexico and other Latin American countries for me. I think Argentina, the style is like the blend that I kind of like, where emotion is central. It's not rapid fire with the commentary, but it's a little bit faster than we're accustomed to. It's faster than an English style call. It adds to it. Even if I don't understand every single word, it adds to the experience. And I think any of us who call games are there to add to the experience. We're not just there to be in the background, but we're not there to be the spotlight. We're there to add and accentuate and highlight things. Like, we're the highlighter pen.
Yeah.
It's like we're there, and it's not that like we're not supposed to be noticed, but we're not the story. But we have to accentuate things. I think that's a really important element of doing it. Local announcers are going to be in a better position to do that with at least one team, or at least a good portion of the story.
Yeah.
Because they live it every day with that team. Every game. They're there every time. It's hard for national announcers to capture that because they're not there for every game with every team.
Yep, Kevin from Charlotte on that, on the national announcers. He said national announcers can do a better job of building excitement in the game, especially playing up the Nashville underdog card. So once again, you're talking about storylines to be that highlighter pin from a national perspective.
Yeah, you have to. You just have to. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I hope that maybe the feel of American soccer commentary, and this is in-game, out-of-game, written, all of it, I hope it continues to evolve. Anybody who's in it, you're always looking to get better. And I hope that in a year like this one, maybe we look a little deeper at the role and what we can do to help make it better and those kinds of things. We will see. What else is on the Twitters? Anything?
Yeah. Nathan Pugh on Orlando for his hashtag On Par Reaction Monday.
Okay.
If Nani cries on a ref's shoulder but nobody cares, are his tears real? Also, I tore both my calf muscles this morning. Also, my daughter scissor tackled my knee and ripped my knee apart. My wife said she wasn't at fault, though. Oh, well.
Oh, we're still complaining about Virgil van Dijk. Man. Wow. Wow. Pickford should have been sent off, but that was just a game situation that happens.
Yep.
The hamstrings and stuff. What do you think Pickford should have been sent off, or what, John?
Oh God!
You said
yes.
that with a mocking tone. I was just sure.
No. I'm Nathan's on a roll. That's what I was told.
The hamstrings and the calves are not going anywhere. You're going to keep pulling those. That's just where we're at. And look, people care. I mean, because the fans in Orlando react to Nani doing that. And again, I don't think it helps. Like, that's the problem, is people are reacting, so people do care. Yeah. Doesn't matter if the national crowd cares. It doesn't matter if anybody else cares. It matters that his teammates are reacting to it, and it matters that his fan base is reacting to it, because then it's going a step further and negatively affecting the team. And that's bad. That's very bad.
Yeah.
That's the issue for me more than anything.
And Kevin is back in. He says, Orlando is that team, and it starts with their leadership. They want to be that team, and their fans embrace it. Even their in-stadium announcer, when he calls cards. Hooliganism and us against the world, everyone hates us and we don't care. That's who they are.
You don't see a lot of top teams act that way. That's all I'm going to say. That mentality only takes you so far. When you become a top team, you got to act different, because when you do this, you fall apart in big moments. 2 playoff games this year, the first 2 playoff games this club's ever been a part of, and they were emotional wrecks in both of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not acceptable, and that's not how you're going to win a title. So we'll see if they learn from it. I think Oscar Pereira will learn from it, and will try to adapt that. But they've got a big decision to make when it comes to Nani, because I think he's a spark for a lot of it, and we'll have to see if they handle it. Before we move on, you got to thank a certain friend of ours over in Decatur, Steve Apolinsky.
That I do. Apolinsky and Associates, LLC, proud supporters of everything soccer down here and the SDH network for wrongful death and serious injury matters. There's one call or one website that you need to go to, and it is his. A couple different ways that you can do it. Shoot Steve an email directly, steve@aa-legal.com, or you can get a free consultation by giving him a call at 404-377-9191, or you can have better success on the World Wide Web than I was this morning. You can go to their website, the homepage, aa-legal.com. When you hit enter, return, the arrow key, large device or small, and you end up with the homepage, a pop-up window pops up, because that's what pop-up windows do. They pop up 24/7, 365 and a quarter. Thank you, Chris Hutchison. And you can get questions answered by the individual who is behind that particular curtain. I still need to find out who that is from Steve, by the way. Over 30 years of experience, over $40 million of judgments for clients in Georgia and Alabama for wrongful death and serious injury matters. Recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine for being one of the top 100 firms in this here state of Georgia for wrongful death and serious injury matters. It is Apolinsky and Associates, LLC. The website is aa-legal.com.
Righty.
Breaking news sounder, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Jogi Löw will remain as Germany head coach for Euro 2021. He ain't going nowhere.
Well, Lottie frickin' da!
Germany, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
Also, that's your Euro campaign, Germany. Yeah, good times. We'll get into more of that on Soccer Over There tonight as well. We'll also discuss what yobs are and how Celtic will not be bowing to yobs, who are demanding for Neil Lennon to be sacked. They got knocked out of the Scottish Cup. It's bad in Glasgow,
Yes.
and Jarrett Smith will join us this evening to talk about it. But the club will not bow to yobs. I had to look that up to make sure I wasn't saying something that shouldn't be said. Yobs is just an insult. It's not. We wouldn't be having the audio drop if we were on ESPN, for example.
Okay, just checking.
No, I checked. That was the whole point. Four Card says, so, since Club America lost, will they sleep on the young Atlanta United roster, or will they be more fired up to win the CCL? Did they qualify for the 21 CCL? They did not qualify for the 2021 CCL just yet. It is a question that's a valid one about will they be more riled up or less riled up? They've got to keep their team together for a few weeks now, and that's going to be an interesting challenge. Actually, I'm sorry, they have qualified because they were the runners-up in the 2019 Apertura. That's what got them in. So they have qualified for 21. I'll be interested to see what they do here. You know, do they decide, you know what, this has been a weird year. Our guys are pretty disappointed. We're going to just kind of throw a team out there? Or are they going to be very motivated to finish on a high? There's not a lot of teams that are left in the CONCACAF Champions League that are actually playing right now. Olympia is. They're playing in the CONCACAF League. They're also playing in the Honduran League. All the American teams that are left are out of their domestic competition. The Mexican teams, who is still playing that's still left in the 2020 competition? Is it... who is it? Hold on. Cruz Azul is. Tigres is not. Yeah, that's it. So Cruz Azul and Olympia. Cruz Azul's in the semifinals in Mexico. Everybody else has been eliminated with the exception of Olympia, who is still playing in Honduras and in CONCACAF League. They got all kinds of stuff going on. So that's going to be weird. I mean, you know, Atlanta didn't make the postseason. LAFC in New York City did, but got eliminated game one. Now America is out after the quarterfinal round. It's going to be a weird CONCACAF event. I don't know how teams come in mentality-wise, honestly. What are you doing, John? You're yelling and nobody can hear you. You've somehow messed up yourself. I didn't do anything to John's audio, but maybe he just started cursing like a madman and he got dropped by ESPN. He's holding up paper that nobody can read. John is losing his mind on one side of the screen, and nobody has any sense of what's happening. This is always good times. I'm not going to keep doing this for the podcast people who are listening and like, what in the world are they doing now? I'm going to continue while John tries to figure things out. Burned. Okay, now I understand what happened with you with live soccer TV and everything. So, I think John might be back.
Yeah, he is.
Do I even want to ask?
It's the same issues that I've been having all morning.
That doesn't make any sense. But okay, we're not going to go into them. Burn messed up on the Boca game. Live Soccer TV didn't have the They've had some weird times, I think, with the rescheduled games in Argentina. I noticed that some they didn't list on Fanatis. I've talked to the Fanatis people about it. They will have every Argentine domestic league match, period. Some of them are on both TIC International and Fanatis, because Fanatis has TIC International. Some are exclusive to Fanatis in the United States, because TIC is on other things. Like I get TIC on AT&T TV. I think Fubo TV gets TIC. But the games that are on in Argentina that are not TIC games that are on like TNT down there or Fox Sports Argentina, Fanatis has those exclusive to Fanatis. I think the Boca game, I think it was a Fox Sports Argentina game. So maybe they got messed up on Live Soccer TV. But every Argentine game is on Fanatis, period. Don't ever have to worry about that. It'll be on one form or fashion, and they'll have it separated out as a highlight. I think it was a 5:20 kickoff, if I remember right. It was a little bit earlier kickoff. So, and it will be available to watch on replay. So There we go. Joe Boss, not a fan of Nani. Adds to the dislike. He calls them the purple pukes. I like it.
Yeah.
People were laughing at you doing strange things with the video issue.
Oh, cursing at my computer for not letting me hit the unmute button?
I guess. You were a mime, not a good one.
No, I was cursing my existence because I had hit the mute button and tried to hit to unmute off, and it wouldn't let me do it. That's what the issue was.
You also need a Sharpie so people could have any clue what you
True.
were writing.
Well, I have a Sharpie pen, and that's what I was writing with. I guess it just needs to be thicker.
You were nannying, according to Joe.
Wow.
You were. I mean, that's accurate.
But I wasn't like gesticulating at the ref and trying to.
You were gesticulating at something.
I was gesticulating, but I wasn't gesticulating in general and trying to, do a woe is me kind of, I can't believe you just did that kind of reaction to something.
Kefsey with a point. This is all back to not listening to Field Mob.
Understood.
Field Mob is wreaking its havoc on you.
And not a surprise.
And they absolutely should.
Yeah.
Burned, go even further down the Argentine TV rabbit hole. I think there's some kind of deal with how the games are divvied up between River and Boca games, that there's always one on TIC every weekend. They won't let both go to TIC, but TIC always gets at least one of them, and I think they rotate. So they'll all be on Fanatis one way or another, that's for sure. Yes, you mentioned the news before you went mute on Yogi Love. That has been confirmed by the German Federation. He continues to enjoy the confidence of the DFB Executive Committee. I guess his presentations went well, or I think his presentations weren't even done yet. So I don't know. Maybe they sped things up, or maybe they felt like they had to have this discussion a little early. I don't know. Maybe it takes a little bit of pressure off those book reports.
Yeah, I was going to say, how long was the book report? That would be.
I don't think he's done the book reports. That's the thing. I think that was December 6th, if I remember right.
Oh, that's true.
So yeah, don't know. We'll see what happens there. Liverpool's trying to add seats to Anfield to get the capacity up to 61,000. Decisions expected by spring of 21. So stay tuned on that. Winter Wind says German football fans continue to not have confidence in the DFB. That would also be accurate.
Yep.
You're going to get updates very quickly, I think, from teams around MLS. I believe that all the teams who did not make the postseason have to announce by today, or at least have to make the decisions, and generally it's going to get announced by today, maybe tomorrow, of their option decisions. We've heard from Montreal, we've heard from Atlanta, we've heard from Cincinnati. That's all we got so far.
Yep.
So other teams have announcements to make. That will be flooding out into the scene very, very soon. The teams that are eliminated from the postseason have to start doing theirs. I don't know what the timeline is for each one, each round, what have you, but you're going to get those as well. Jason Nix with a question going back to VAR, because VAR became a big topic over the weekend, like it always does. And I think in England it was a little out of control with some of the discussion, which is nothing new. Jason said, did you see the Dutch idea of VAR offside? 5 centimeter thick lines, and if the lines touch, the call in the field stands. It's creating a buffer area, essentially. It's creating leeway. I don't hate it. I think one of the biggest issues with offside in the VAR world is that the old idea that we were always told was, tie goes to the attacking player. If it's close, it goes to the attacking player. If they're level, it goes to the attacking player. That there was always a shade to the attacker. That's what we were told. It didn't always work out that way because the AR is calling it from what they see live action. But that was the idea. So we had this feeling that, okay, the attacker is always going to have the benefit of the doubt. Cool. Well, now when you get down to this, you're removing all benefit of the doubt. You're seeing lines. You're getting down to it. And I think sometimes people are trying to argue things that are it's disingenuous. Like, you're seeing the lines. I have not ever seen a situation where the lines were drawn incorrectly or using the wrong body part or that kind of stuff. I know that's becoming a conversation now. Stop. The lines are there. The lines, they're not just randomly drawn by somebody. They're computer generated. That's the whole Hawkeye system. That's why they go out and they measure where the cameras are going to be, the angles, the pitch, any kind of slope on the pitch. Like they're measuring everything before the season to be able to do it, have confidence in the system. Yes, there is a margin of error in the system. It is very small. This Dutch idea is finding a way to get back to the idea of the attacker has the benefit of the doubt without changing the laws of the game. It can work in leagues that use VAR. Not every league and every competition uses VAR, so that's one issue. It only works in leagues that are using a Hawkeye kind of system, maybe a different supplier, but it only works in those. Like, it would not affect MLS. Also, understand one thing, too, with VAR, and especially in England. What you're seeing on TV and where lines are drawn, that's not actually the way it happens for the referees. They're not getting the thicker lines drawn on it because they don't need it. They're just trying to make the right call. TV is thickening the lines to show you where it is, to make it easier to see. Like, John needed a thicker pen to write down that he was yelling and could unmute himself. They do that so you can see it on TV. That's not just randomly done. It's done for TV. It's not the full effect of the situation. I mean, the lines are pretty exact. I don't hate it, Jason, but I don't know if it necessarily changes anything, really, because there's always going to be close calls. The difference now is where there was a close call before, we knew that the assistant referee didn't have video assistance, was watching it live. It's very difficult to call it live because of all the moving pieces to it and where they're located. So even when we disagreed, we kind of knew, like, that's a really hard call to make. Now we can see it in great detail, even in a league like MLS where we don't have the Hawkeye system. We can see it, we can argue it more, and we feel like it should be right. Where I get frustrated is when people argue that it's done incorrectly when it is done correctly by the letter of the law.
Right.
It is an on or off situation. There's not a maybe situation here. It is or it isn't. Now, there can be interpretations to offside. That's a whole different conversation. It changes the way we're arguing, and it might change the argument. It might make it harder to follow, to be honest, in some ways, because then people are going to argue, well, which way are you drawing the buffer area? Where's the buffer area? How is this? It's still going to be able to get down to close calls and have a decision to be made.
Mm-hmm. The way that it was printed in papers overseas, the Eredivisie have gone rogue against FIFA's orders
because it's against the laws of the game.
Yeah, And they've implemented that linesman's call, and they use the example, and Nathan Pugh probably should close his ears. The example dealing with Sadio Mane at the end of Liverpool and Everton, the Merseyside derby, where if they had adopted the linesman's call, the Mane goal would have counted in this case.
The linesman's call, what are you saying?
No, that's how it's being phrased here. Against FIFA's orders, implemented a 10-centimeter lineman's call to avoid hassle and discussions to the centimeter.
Okay, so they're just creating a buffer. Okay.
Yeah.
They're calling it the linesman's call.
They're calling it a 10-centimeter lineman's call is what they're calling it. To avoid hassle and discussions to the centimeter. But you're still going to have hassle and discussions. You're just creating a buffer zone, though.
You are. You're taking calls that by the letter of the law are offside, and you're making them onside. That's what you're doing with it.
Yeah.
That's up to you if you think that's good or bad. It's against the laws of the game, first off.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. There's just it does not follow the laws of the game. And yes, it is fair to say they've gone rogue. And Jason says, I still disagree with it's on or off. There's someone deciding when to stop the footage. Have we really seen a call where they incorrectly stopped the footage? I haven't. I haven't. If there is one, then I'm wrong. It hasn't happened very much. I don't think that's the issue. Now, Jason gets into another point, and this, I think, is a more important discussion. What body parts are you using? This is where it gets hard because you are able to play the ball with your shoulder. You are able to play the ball with your head. You can score goals with those. If you are leaning and you are off with your head, it's a playable body part. You're off. Do you want to make it where it is just by the foot? It's easier to make a more definitive decision. I completely agree with that. It's easier to make the call with just feet. It does give the attacker a bit of an advantage if they're leaning, but I mean, how much can you really truly lean? Are you going to run like completely slanted with your head facing forward? Like, what kind of an advantage are you getting from that? I don't think you are.
Yeah.
You can persuade me that offside should be rewritten to only be measured by the foot closest to the goal. Cool. I can work with that. I can buy that because I just don't think you get an advantage from like running and leaning over. Now, you could score a goal where your head was in an offside position and you score the goal on that play, and it's allowed in this scenario. I think that's extremely rare, and I'll take that trade-off. I would take that trade-off because it would give more of the leeway to the attacking player. The couple of now Kessie's going to a different point about slowing the video. From an offside perspective, I don't care about slowing the video. From a foul perspective, slowing the video can skew things. Those are two separate conversations for me. I think there's still a disconnect for how VAR situations are presented in broadcasts, and I mean, we're not getting any real communication from VAR or AVR for radio. I can tell you that. We didn't get any real communication for that situation with Caden Clark either, to be perfectly honest. So it's hard to present it properly, but we're not getting everything that they are. They're making decisions, and we're not seeing everything that they're using to make a decision. Now, in other leagues, you're seeing more, but maybe not everything. It's weird. It's tough. Burned, and I did not see this. He says, lots of discussion today in Germany about VAR during the Bayern game. Bayern got 2 huge calls from VAR that didn't feel right. Big team bias still exists even with VAR, and it should not with VAR.
Right.
I feel like where it can exist is in that whole idea of clear and obvious. And I thought Dale Johnson of ESPN, made a really good point about the penalty that Brighton got against Liverpool late. that went to VAR and was given. That did not feel like a situation where clear and obvious should have come into play. That did not feel like a situation where the VAR should have gotten involved. That's how I felt about the goal or the penalty that was called back with John Gallagher and Aloy Room. It didn't feel like a clear and obvious situation. It was called on the field. That feels like the video assistant referee is overstepping their bounds to re-referee a situation.
Right.
Byrne, did that happen with the Bayern calls, or was it either-or kind of decisions? That needs to stop. When it comes to VAR, I think the idea that VAR needs to go or the game's worse with VAR, I disagree with. VAR needs to be used better. Referees need to be trained better with it. And I would like to see that bar that has always been talked about as very high be even higher in their involvement. Offside decisions, I'm okay with. I'm okay with these discussions about it. Let's get it right. Let's get it to where everybody says it feels right. I'm good with that. The situations about is it a penalty, is it not a penalty? If you're looking to see if they're in the box or out of the box, again, it is a either-or situation. I'm okay with VAR getting involved in those. When the ref makes a call, the line for the video assistant referee to get involved has to be very high on is it a penalty or is it not a penalty in terms of is it a foul, is it not a foul? And is it a red card, is it not a red card? The referees have to make more of those decisions in real time. And then, honestly, I would rather have the referee request to look at something more so than the video assistant referee saying, you have to look at this.
Yeah.
VAR's not implemented consistently enough around the world. You have some centralized locations. You have some where it's a regular referee in the league who's just working on VAR that day. You have some where it's retired people who all they do is VAR. You have others where it's up-and-coming people who are new to VAR. Like, there needs to be more consistency because that line of when they get involved has to be extremely high. Like, it should be, I mean, for me, the conversation should be in those moments. And we'll use the Gallagher one and the Brighton penalty. It has to be, did you get a good look at that incident? The VAR saying this to the referee.
Yeah.
And if they say yes, are you comfortable with your call? Yes. Okay, cool. Done.
Then that should be it.
It shouldn't be lobbying for it.
Right.
If the referee said, no, I didn't get a good look, I was screened, do you have something for me? Yes. Okay, let's go take a look at it. It's got to be, it can't be used to re-referee moments. Right. That's my frustration with VAR. The offside stuff doesn't frustrate me nearly as much as it does other people. It's where the video assistant referee re-referees moments.
Yeah.
That's where I get frustrated. Monteflo says VAR seems to be used inconsistently from game to game, league to league. Sometimes too liberal, sometimes too strict. Totally agree. There's got to be more consistency. Monteflo says the Gallagher PK overturn was more of a PK than the DK Dark Arts dive for me. I think both were PKs. Yeah, by the letter of the law in my book, both are PKs. They're very different. You know, I don't think Gallagher... I think there was an attempt to insinuate that he was diving. I don't think that was the case at all. If he was losing his balance, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
DK, in his moment to get a penalty yesterday that Nani ended up having saved by Matt Turner, big save, DK knows what he's doing. He's stepping in front of a defender who's trying to step up and clear. He's stepping in front. He gets to the spot, and he gets hit from behind. It's a penalty.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an intent to score a goal on DK's part. It's not an intent to really do much other than get hit. But that's a penalty.
Yep.
I don't like it, but it's a penalty. And I think they got it right. The situations with the Bayern game, Byrne says it was about the foul, the arm pull on Neuer. Shouldn't have been overruled. It was not clear and obvious. Yeah. And that's where then you go to that step of, would another team get that call? Would another player get that call? Those kinds of things. And that can get incredibly frustrating.
Now, for me, I would always like to have VAR in a centralized location. I'd like for it to be officials who are specifically there to do that all season long. I liked your idea of the recently retired or longtime veterans who can just go into being video assistants and still be active in the game. I don't like the inconsistency of a veteran and then a younger guy, and a veteran and a younger guy experience being different, because then there's always that specter of the idea of, if there's a younger center ref and you have an older, more experienced ref who still goes out and referees matches, who can supersede, and he'll sit there and see something where the younger official might just yield to that opinion because it's a more senior official. And that, to me, would create issues as well in that kind of an idea. And going to the Gallagher decision, I thought that John was trying to evade and then wasn't given the opportunity to continue to pursue the ball after contact, and he was taken down. He wasn't given the chance to get up and continue the idea of the play, too. So two separate thoughts.
If you're losing your balance, it doesn't mean you're fair game to get hit, tripped, anything.
Right.
It's just like it doesn't supersede the argument that should have been a penalty in my book. It needs to be better.
Mm-hmm.
FIFA and IFAB need to work on this. They have their meeting coming up in March where they will make decisions for the upcoming season. They will also be talking about concussions and substitutions around concussions. And there was another big incident this weekend in England. Raul Jimenez has suffered a skull fracture after a collision in the game with Arsenal. Conscious, sounds like everything is okay. I believe there was some talk about a surgery this morning.
Yes.
But yesterday he was conscious. He was aware of everything. There wasn't any concerns about that at that time. David Luiz should have been substituted. He was not. He finished the first half. They talked about how he didn't feel well, and he was pulled at halftime. That's the part that is really, really scary here, because that's the part that has to be controlled better. I will probably be saying this a lot in the lead up to those decisions in March that get done, but they need to have a temporary substitution so players can get properly checked. That's the issue. It's not about adding a substitution for players who have concussions. That's not the issue, in my opinion. The issue is getting players properly checked, so you're not rushing a player back on because you don't want to use that substitution in that spot. You need to get checked out. David Luiz, it should have been an easy decision because, not just the concussion elements of it. He's bleeding through the bandage on his head. Like, that doesn't mean he's got a concussion either. I think at times these things get really confused. I had a concussion and there was no blood. Plenty of players have concussions and there's no blood. Plenty of players, get split open and they don't have a concussion. That needs to be understood. Just because there was blood doesn't mean he was concussed. Sounds like he was concussed because of the description of how he felt when he came out at halftime. That has to be checked out properly. Give teams time to do it. Temporary sub, when approved by an independent medical professional, to get properly checked. At the end of the proper check, and if you need to put a time limit on it, fine. 10, 15 minutes, pick a number, settle on it, and you move forward. At the end of that time, if the player is allowed to continue, they come back in, that temporary sub comes off the field. If they are not allowed to continue, that's where the manager has to make a decision. Do they make the substitution there, or if they don't have any subs left, if it's late in the game, then they got to play shorthanded. If you want to add a concussion sub in that situation, that's fine. That's separate. But that doesn't deal with the issue about getting checked out. That's the number one thing here. Just giving teams the ability to make an additional sub for a head injury doesn't fix the problem. The problem is the players need to be checked out first. That will eliminate any situations where teams would try to use their game the system. And that's a concern everybody has, more so than it seems like the players who actually have a concussion, which is backwards to me. But it's always about, they're going to game the system. Well, if you just allow an extra sub for a head injury, then yeah, you could. A player will, if they need to come off the field, they're dead tired, they're exhausted, late in a game, they're a holding midfielder or a center back, they need to come off the field. Well, then you tell them to go and defend a corner kick, and whatever happens, that player goes down, and they called an elbow, or it was whiplash, because whiplashes can give concussions. You can find a way to say, well, he's got a head injury, and we got to make our additional sub right now. That opens up a door to gaming the system more than doing it properly and allowing a check period, a medical check for a player who is showing concussion symptoms or is involved in a collision like David Luiz and Raul Jimenez was. Temporary sub, check by an independent doctor, then a decision gets made. And if you want to allow the additional sub in those moments, fine, but it's the temporary sub that is the issue, and I'm afraid that IFAB and FIFA and everybody involved in this discussion are overlooking that and trying to oversimplify it.
The Headway organization, the Brain Injury Association in Britain, came out with a statement this morning, local time. Quote, too often in football we see players returning to the pitch having undergone a concussion assessment only to be withdrawn a few minutes later when it's clear they're not fit to continue. That's the very reason why we urgently need temporary concussion substitutes in football. You simply cannot take a risk with head injuries. They're not like muscular injuries where you can put a player back on, quote, to see if they can run it off, end quote.
Right.
One further blow to the head when concussed could have serious consequences. Now they get into David Luiz. The question that has to be asked is, had the concussion substitutes rule been in place, would Luiz have been allowed to return to the field of play? Would that extra time in the treatment room have led to a different decision being made? And they go further down from there. But yeah, Headway came out and they were less than pleased with the decision that Mikel Arteta made.
Yeah, and look, you have to defend the managers a little bit in these situations because substitutions are very difficult to deal with, period. You don't want to, especially when you're a defender, it's even worse. You don't want to break up a back line that's playing together. You don't want to make an unnecessary substitution. You don't want to use one of your sub windows in the first half. Like, these are things that make it difficult for a manager. That's why the manager shouldn't be involved in this decision. It should come down to, because, look, if it's a game that doesn't matter or the team's eliminated or it's late in the season, then, yeah, you make the sub, you don't worry about it. But in a situation like this, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, Mikel Arteta's job's on the line. Mm-hmm. They need points. They need to win. They're struggling a little bit right now. They obviously think that they're in a better position to win by starting the player. So you're putting them in an unfair situation. Take it out of their hands. Take it out of the manager's hands. If it is approved to be checked, you get a temporary sub. You're not going to play shorthanded. We're going to make sure the player's okay. If he's okay, great. He comes back in. If he's not okay, well, then you got to make the decision. But he's not playing anymore because we're taking that decision out of your hands. That has to be done. It's unfair to put managers in these situations with the pressure they have. Ragamuffin says, do you expand the bench to 8 or 9 if you add a potential concussion sub? I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking on that. That's why I have not been in favor of a concussion sub. I have not. I have never been in favor of that. If they want to approve it here, it has to be combined with the temporary sub to get checked. I would treat it just like any other injury because I don't think, a sub, a late game situation, let's say it's an 80th minute situation, and a player has a head-to-head collision, he's in a bad way, he's going to go get checked, he gets a temporary sub. He's getting checked out. If in the 80th minute a player breaks his leg, he's not playing anymore. And if you don't have any more subs, you don't have any more subs. People will argue, and I've already seen it, and I think it's not right, and I disagree with the argument, but in that moment, an 80th minute situation, the team will benefit from having a temporary sub while that player's getting checked out. It's why the independent doctor approves that check. You can't give an extra sub when a player has a head-to-head collision versus a player breaking their leg. The team is shorthanded either way.
Right.
I think the temporary sub is the important element here. It's the number one element. I would not give the additional concussion substitution. it would be the same situation as normal. The only difference is in this case, it's late in the game. You have a situation, let's say they collide heads in the 80th minute, and you're able to use a temporary sub while that player is being checked for a concussion. Okay, that's going to buy you some time. Yes, it could end up helping a team in individual situations. It could, sure. Where, they don't have to, if the player broken his leg, you just have to play shorthanded. You already know that. In this case, they're getting checked out. You get a temporary sub while that's happening. I wouldn't give the team a bonus sub if that player has a concussion. But I would give the temporary sub while they're getting checked for a concussion, even if they're out of subs.
Yeah. And then Alan Shearer, post-match, in the post-match punditry channels that are out there, he laid into Arsenal. He said, football needs to get real. It needs to wake up. It needs to get serious. Not next year, not next week. Now, this has been going on too long. The protocols in football are not acceptable. If David Luiz has passed all the protocols, how on earth is he allowed to come back on with a wound bleeding through the bandage, end quote.
Well, again, this is where, and I understand it, but that has nothing to do with a concussion.
Right.
We have to stop with that. The fact that there's blood doesn't mean he's concussed or not concussed. It doesn't mean anything about the concussion.
Yeah.
It means he has a head wound.
Mm-hmm.
You can be concussed and not have a head wound.
Right.
You can have a head wound and not be concussed. That is not the issue. And it is not correct to say that it is the issue. The fact that he shouldn't be bleeding on the field, that's an issue, yes, and you might need to get better bandages.
Yeah.
But is he concussed or is he not concussed? That's the issue. That's the issue. I mean, there are moments where people get concussions and they're not even hit in the head.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to be understood. You can get hit and fall and have the whiplash scenario and you're concussed. You can get hit in the back of the head and you're concussed. That's what happened to me. You can get hit in the front of the head. You can get hit in the side of the head. You can get hit by the ball. You can get hit by an elbow. You can get hit by a knee. You can get hit by another head. You can get hit by nothing. And you can be concussed. So stop with the blood thing. That, you got to know better. That is not the issue. The issue is whatever their concussion protocol checks were, he went back on the field and then had to come off with concussion symptoms. It's also another thing I think we have to be careful about as commentators. We don't know if he had a concussion or not, and you won't know in that moment. You go back to the Eric Remedi situation in New England, 2018, I think, or 2019. 2019. Had a back of the head issue, or he was hit in the back of the head. He was checked out. He was brought back on the field. I was watching him because I'm a little sensitive to these things. He did not show any issues when he came back on the field initially. And then he had to be substituted because he went down. That's why you need this time to check, because you can't do a proper check in a short period of time. You just can't. And that was like very early in the game, too. The last time you want to make a sub. You only get 3 of them at that point. You don't want to make a sub 5 minutes in. Do the temporary check. But it's not always easy. It's not always easy to tell. And the thing that's difficult about it is a player can be concussed and not show anything that day. They can not show anything and come back on the field and play. That's why you have to have these checks. And they're getting better and better at the technology of even somebody who is not showing major symptoms. You can do a check and find out that they have had a significant enough issue with their head, with their brain, because it's a brain injury. You can do the checks to find that even if they're not showing symptoms. Sometimes the symptoms don't come on until later. I can tell you from experience with mine. I wasn't playing, I was coaching. I got hit in the back of the head with a ball. I felt like I had a migraine. I'd had a headache earlier in the day. I'd had a headache, I think, on the way down to the training session. I got hit hard in the back of the head, like the back corner of the head, with a shot that was wayward. I was talking to a group off to the other side of the field. And it really hurt. like a headache. Got through the rest of the session, drove home. Didn't feel great, but I felt like I'd got hit in the head and had a headache. And went to sleep, fine. No concerns. Didn't have any dizziness or anything. Woke up the next day, went about my morning with breakfast and whatever, and didn't feel great. And was like, all right, I'm going to work from home this morning. And I sat down at my laptop, and I thought my head was going to cave in. When I started to look at my laptop and started trying to work, and I was like, I got to go lay down. And it didn't really start to bother me until that point, and that was 12 hours after, at least. So, and it just kept getting worse for me. Like, I couldn't watch HD television. I couldn't look at bright lights. I was wearing sunglasses in the house. Like, it was a good period of 6 to 8 weeks before I felt like normal enough to feel comfortable driving again.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen straight away for me. Like, if I was playing and that happened, I might have kept playing. Just felt like I had a headache. Now, maybe by playing, some of these other things might have come out further. I don't know. There's no way to know that. But you got to be careful with this stuff because blood doesn't signify it. Symptoms don't always signify it. The concussion checks have to be as thorough as possible. They take time to do. Teams need to have that decision taken out of their hands because it's not like American football. I don't know rugby substitution rules. It's not like basketball. Player can get subbed out and brought back in. In this game, they can't. They should be allowed to in this situation.
One of the other storylines that's out there, and it's from one of the two newspapers that we don't name here on the show.
Yeah, they stink.
Arsenal apparently had the club medics concluded David Luiz was allowed to be okay to drive home as normal yesterday.
I don't know why you would allow that after you did have to make the substitution because he wasn't feeling well at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know his situation. I don't know if he was driving 5 minutes. I don't know if he was driving 2 hours. I don't know. I would think that if I am paying David Luiz what I'm paying him, and he is a very important part of my team, I'm going to be overly protective of him at that point and say, I know you're good. I know you feel like you're fine. I understand you want to drive. Let's let Jimmy over here drive you home.
Yep.
He'll drive your car home. We'll have somebody come get Jimmy. No problem. Jimmy, come on, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to take care of him because teams have to take care of these guys in those moments.
Right. Yeah.
I would think by that point that you would have been far enough down the road that you would have had at least a concern about a concussion since you pulled him from the game and you shouldn't have let him drive home.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. Like what I said, from my experience, I didn't have that concern at that time. I felt fine, except for a headache. I drove home. I also didn't have somebody like a little Jimmy to come and drive my car home either.
Yeah.
I was, coaching a youth team. If you're making that much money and I'm paying you that much money, man, I'm going to be taking care of you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have Jimmy and Steve and Johnny drive you home and make sure you're good. I'm not letting you risk anything.
Yep.
Burned says, the fact is there's not a lot of discussion in other countries except the U.S. and UK about long-term effects of head injuries in sports, which is wrong. There should be.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of uninformed folks discussing and voting on a topic they don't understand, and that's absolutely true. You still have the mentality because, look, in this country, American football has been at the forefront of this discussion because it's a huge sport in this country. There's been concussion issues in Major League Soccer for its whole existence. You've had a number of very good players in this league have to call a career early because of concussion issues. Josh Gross, Ross Pauley, who's an incredibly talented central midfielder. I thought Ross Pauley would be a national team player. and he had concussion issues. I mean, and there's so many more. Taylor Twellman, obviously. But it's always been there. But American football gets all the attention, so the discussions there have led the way. Now in the UK, and it's actually pretty recent, that you're starting to get twofold. You're starting to hear more about concussions, but you're also starting to hear more about older players who have had issues with dementia.
Yep.
That has been accelerated, and there's talk that was it because of the way old soccer balls were created when they get waterlogged? Was it because of the way the game was taught back then, the way training sessions were done with lots of heading drills, that kind of stuff? And I don't know enough to say yes or no. The ball is much lighter than it used to be. It doesn't get waterlogged. Those things absolutely help. I don't know how those players were taught to play. I don't know what the coaching was like at younger ages. I don't know if they just headed a ball over and over and over and over again, which I think we have a pretty good sense now that that's not a good idea. It does need to be talked about more. FIFA needs to take the lead on this because they're the ones that can change some of that in other countries. FIFA has to get out in front of it. It's very sad that FIFA really didn't get this until they had a player in their showcase event, the World Cup final, get concussed and have to be removed eventually from the game, and I don't know if he even remembers playing in it. That's not what we need. We need this temporary sub. FIFA can get out in front of it and really do something good here if they will, and IFAB needs to be pushed. The good thing is IFAB is overseen by those UK organizations. The federations in England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland have the say in IFAB. That's good that they're in this. If FIFA doesn't do it themselves, then IFAB needs to approve this, but there needs to be that temporary sub. Shiva says, I have a question. How long does it take to totally rule out concussion? There's not a roadmap. That's the hard thing about it. And that's what makes this difficult, because a player can check out and be good, but then have symptoms develop later. That can happen. It's not as common, and I don't think a team should be blamed in those situations. But you need a more thorough check to be sure, because right now it's relatively simple in some places. I mean, look at the last World Cup. I mean, you saw some countries' trainers come out and slap guys in the face to see if they had a concussion. That's going to help anything.
Yeah.
Dump water on them. That's going to fix it. I mean, we've got to have a cohesive plan, and even that won't be perfect. But again, with injuries, I mean, you can check somebody's knee and think it's okay, and then they get checked out the next day and they have a torn ACL. That does happen too. It's not as common, but it can happen. Just like it's not as common if you go through a full proper check to have symptoms develop later, but it can happen. There's not a perfect roadmap here, because people are still understanding everything that goes into concussions and the human brain. And it's complicated. It's difficult. We can do better in this game, though. And I hope that IFAB and FIFA take the lead on this.
Yeah. Now, my question for you is somewhat personal when it comes to this particular topic. What's it like living with one?
Incredibly scary, because your brain's not working the way it's supposed to. I mean, for me, and I would say that I probably had a fairly mild one. There's not a solution, and this was something that I was trying to explain to people at the time. I mean, luckily this happened when we were doing stuff with the Silverbacks reserve team, and our trainer who had started with our group had went to the Silverbacks, and great sports medicine guy, a great athletic trainer, and I was talking to him the whole time, and he's like, look, I mean, what you're describing to me, you have a concussion. You can go and get a CT scan, you can go and get all these other things. What you're describing, there's no threat. You got hit with a ball. There's no threat of a skull fracture. There's no threat of this progressing into anything else. It's a concussion. You can go do all those things, and they're not going to tell you anything. There's not a medicine to take. There's not, some magic prescription to fix it. It's rest. You're resting your brain. And if you haven't been able to tell by me doing shows all the time and writing all the time, I kind of like to work a lot. And when you have to rest your brain, you can't do anything. You can't do anything. It's isolating. I mean, it's scary because, like, the only way I could not feel just drunk, like, that's the best description of what it felt like, and not like fun party at the bar drunk with a bunch of friends. It felt like the end of a 24-hour bender kind of drunk.
Yeah.
Like, it was not fun. You felt out of it, but in a drunk kind of way, in a bad way, all the time. And the only way to relieve that stuff was to sleep, was to be in a dark room. Everybody's different. Like, for me, I was able to at least listen to stuff. I couldn't watch things very much at all. I got finally, and this was probably about a month in, to where I could watch a game, like a 2-hour game on, this was 2012, so we had one TV that was HD, and we had one TV that was an older TV. I could watch it on the older TV. I couldn't watch HD. It was crazy. Like, the difference was crazy to me. I guess it's just the way, like, your eyes and your brain work. I don't know, but I couldn't watch a game on the HD TV for even longer. I could watch a game on the SD TV, and yeah, I probably looked away at times too. But I could listen to stuff, and this was what our athletic trainer was telling me. Like, some people can't listen to anything; they can't do anything. Some people can watch stuff but can't listen to stuff. Some people can listen to stuff and not watch stuff. Like, it's all different because it's where you're hit, how it affects your brain. Everybody's wired differently anyway. There's no consistency there. So I got to a point where I could listen to the radio. I couldn't use my laptop, but I could use my phone a little bit, not for very long at a time, but the laptop bothered me. The phone didn't. Like a tablet didn't bother me as much. But it's isolating because, I mean, you just can't, and there's no timeline. So, like, you don't really know. I mean, I remember about 5-6 weeks after it happened, I went to a potluck Thanksgiving thing around the corner from the house. And I felt okay that day. I felt okay going in, but there were a lot of people there, and I just had to kind of sit in the corner because it was too overwhelming. It was, again, that drunk feeling, like where, when things get kind of hazy and spinning and all that. Like, it felt that way because there were so many people there, and it's like I felt like I was hearing a conversation that was happening 2 tables away, and I couldn't hear the person in front of me and like, focus on what they were saying. I couldn't focus. It's crazy. Like, your brain needs to rest. And that's the only way to recover from it. And that's when people say, like, well, he's got a concussion, he'll be back in 2 weeks. You have no way to know that.
Yeah.
He might be back in 5 days. He might be back in 6 weeks. Like, there's no way to know. That's the craziest thing about it. It's scary. But that's dealing with the effects of it. Like, this is a whole different situation where you're trying to, like, identify it.
Yeah.
And the Hawks have done a really good thing. I can't remember the name of the technology that they've used. But they're trying to use technology to identify concussions in players, to not put players in these situations where if you're concussed and you go back out and you get hit in the head again, that's where you can lead to real danger. That secondary hit is what can lead to real danger. That's why you've got to try to identify this as best as you can. And the player's not going to say, I want to come out, typically, because they want to play. That's what they're paid to do. That's their life. They want to play. The manager doesn't want to pull the player because substitutions are so valuable. You've got to take it out of their hands, and you've got to have the independent doctor say, we're going to take the time to do this check. You've got to continue to work with all the medical experts to have the best possible check you can do, to have the best information you possibly can on if that player should continue or not.
Yeah, Georgia Tech is using something, it's eye tracking technology called SyncThink.
That might be the one that the Hawks, I think the Hawks brought one in first. They were the first one locally that I heard about it. It might be that.
iSync technology uses modified virtual reality goggles to measure and detect visual tracking impairments in less than a minute. And visual tracking impairment is often a symptom of a concussion.
Yeah, that's a very strong one to use. That's great. And we need more of these things, and it needs to be more commonly available to people. David says, I would think rugby playing countries would have looked at this more, but we have heavy contact helmet sports like hockey and football, so the U.S. should certainly have more attention to this. But yeah, concern of uneducated folks looking at this is real. That's absolutely real. Winter had a bad concussion playing high school soccer. Second one that he knows of for certain. That's the only concussion I ever had. I'd been hit in the head before, but I'd never been knocked out in any kind of game I was playing. The proverbial like seeing stars.
Yeah.
Felt like maybe that happened once. I drew a charge in intramural basketball at UGA. Man, it was such a good play, too, because it was like the last possession for the opponent. We're tied in the tournament. We weren't very good. But I drew a charge on somebody just driving out of control to the lane, and back of my head hit the basketball floor. Felt like I saw stars a little bit then. Got kicked in the head when I was little playing goalkeeper. Definitely had head-to-head collisions going up for headers and stuff. Caught an elbow here or there. So, yeah, I mean, I know I was hit in the head, but I was never injured with a concussion or anything that knocked me out or anything that would have led me to believe I previously had a concussion. Yeah. Probably did, and it just was so mild that I didn't really know. That's the thing, is that technically is a concussion as well. And that's the scary element. J-Dub says, what will it take for Europe to take the issue seriously? If the Wolves incident isn't, what is? I think that's going to be part of it. It's just going to be continued push. It's going to be continued lobbying, continued push. I really think FIFA has to get out in front of this because they're the ones that can spread this information to everybody around the world. FIFA has to take the lead. Modiflow, we've got a lot of concussion stuff, so we're going to keep moving along with this because I want to get to this discussion as we start to wrap up on a Monday. Right. We do have soccer over there coming up at 7 o'clock. We'll get deeper into the around the world stuff. Barcelona has a new presidential candidate that is turning a lot of heads. He's been there before. He is very well respected in Joan Laporta. That's going to change that whole race dramatically. And it might change Lionel Messi's future because Messi and Laporta have a good relationship, according to reports. And Mataflo threw this in to the Twitch pitch. Barcelona was fined for Messi's tribute to Maradona, $3,000, which I think was the minimum that they had to be fined for. It's about promoting other companies that are not on the kit. Because when he pulled up revealed the Newell's kit, there were sponsors on that. Yeah, the club has to pay the fine. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's stupid, but I get it in general sense. This is a little bit different situation. Again, it's letter of the law stuff. I understand it. Matt says you can start showing symptoms up to 14 days after a head injury. You can start to show symptoms of a concussion. I didn't know it was that long. Usually it doesn't take that long, but it can happen. Matt also says, I applaud Georgia Soccer for making coaches take a mandatory concussion protocol course every year. That's a fairly new development, and that is great. And every association needs to do that. The U.S. Soccer Federation needs to be driving that home. It has to be front of mind. It has to be for coaches. Byrne, talking to J-Dub about what will change it in Europe, says a large settlement paid out by a league or clubs to retired players with CTE, same as here. Yeah, that could, and that discussion is starting to come up more in England. It'll be a little difficult there because of Premier League is separate now from the Football League, and it wasn't when these issues might have happened, and then you get into the conversation that happens with the NFL about, well, because somebody has CTE, it doesn't mean it happened in the NFL. It could have happened in college. It could have happened in high school. It could have happened in the Pop Warner League, which it absolutely could have because CTE builds up. It's not an easy discussion to have. Just not easy. Domer says, concussion sucks. For me, my memory is not good at all. I get super dizzy when my heart rate is high. I still have that, absolutely. So I have to take breaks when exercising. Also, light sensitivity, hats, duh, I have that too. Certain lights bug me more, and it's really frustrating. Domer said, I've had several concussions over 30 years of riding racing motorcycles. So, yeah, I mean, it does have lingering effects. I know Taylor Twellman did an interview, I want to say it was a year or two ago, and this was where I started to realize, like, okay, yeah, some of the things that bother me now are probably related to that. The heart rate thing when exercising is a pretty consistent one, I think. He has talked about how it's hard for him to work out. That's why golf has been a big thing for him because, you can keep your heart rate down but still do something. It's hard. It's very hard. The light thing is the biggest thing for me that's lingered. And, I mean, I've never liked fluorescent lights, but now, if I'm going to be around fluorescent lights, I start taking ibuprofen early in the day because I'm going to get a headache. There's just no way around it. Mazzano says, immediately after having a head-to-head contact, presumed concussion, it felt like I was underwater. That's another good way to describe it. Pressure headache, ears clouded, slow eye movement, reaction times reduced. Yeah, the underwater feeling's another one I've heard people use. Which, if you had the feeling I did, where it's like you're into the night drunk, it's kind of a similar feeling as well too. Nick says my younger son still has effects of back-to-back concussions in middle school football 5 years ago. Yeah, I mean it's hard. It can happen in sports, it can happen in life, it can happen in a car accident, it can happen falling off a bike. I mean, it's like it can happen. And I think some people have taken it too far to say, can't do sports because it could happen. No, I disagree with that thoroughly. But sports need to be more cognizant of it now that we understand it better, and we're still learning more about it every day. Kefsey does appreciate my charge drawing, but sorry for my head. Not how I felt that day. I was very proud of drawing that charge. But
yes,
yeah, maybe it affected me. How much longer away would that have been? It would have been about 14, 13 years later that when I got hit in the back of the head, I had a concussion. So, yeah, I mean, it's just we're learning as we go. Now, kids today will know more about it than we did, and coaches today know more about it than our coaches did. And that will help everybody safety-wise, for sure. Johannes chimes in, I once won a team internal competition as a 15-year-old with my U16 team for heading the ball against a wall 68 consecutive times.
Wow.
I feel now that this was not a smart decision. I see stars when I have quick head motions or when I'm super excited, which happens frequently as a passionate sports fan.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's stuff that you would do. That's what you were taught to do to get better. And this is a tough discussion, I think, for the game because you're not going to outlaw heading. I don't think. Maybe you get to a point where you do. Maybe so. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And I think there is value in teaching the right way to head the ball because that can help prevent injury.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I'm also with the idea that U.S. Soccer has started to follow that you don't need heading in games if you're, under the age of 12. For two things. I mean, one, I don't want kids learning to play the game by just kicking the ball as far as they can, which is going to invite more headers. Keep the ball on the ground. Learn to play. Learn to play with the ball at your feet. That's going to be a good thing. But we know now that your head, your neck muscles, all the different things that can play into concussions are not fully developed when you're younger. So you don't need to be heading the ball a whole bunch. But even as you get older, you don't need to be doing it over and over again. Repetition doesn't really help. You need to learn the proper technique because it can help keep you safe. But, yeah, do we need, heading the ball against the wall a certain number of times? That was a common technique. That was a common thing that teams did and kids did. We don't need that now. We know better now. That's good. We all have to find our ways to deal with the ongoing issues that we have with it. And I think anybody who's played sports, and it's not even just a soccer thing, has these kind of things that we didn't know enough when that happened. But hopefully the kids playing today know more, and the coaches involved today know more. J-Dub says the underwater vibe, the underwater thing. After my mountain biking crash, I felt it, but not for 24 hours later. Wow. With me, it wasn't quite 24 hours, but yeah, it's rough. Sean says, I got one during a car accident, and now when running, I get dizzy depending on the activity. That was something I did not know until I saw Twellman mention it, about the heart rate thing. And when I first, not even first, I mean, this was a while after I was back to normal and doing things. I'd try working out, and it was really hard just to ride the exercise bike. That's gotten better over time. I'm able to ride a bike now, an exercise bike, and push a little bit at times, but I can't ride, I can't do anything for speed. I can't do anything for intensity. I've got to do it over an extended period of time because I can't allow my heart rate to get too high because I will get dizzy. The moving your head real quickly thing, yeah, I hadn't really thought about that too much, but yeah, that's there too.
Yep.
It's tough. It's tough. It's very difficult. Jason Nick says the concussions for his son were with the Omaha drill.
Oh.
Which, yeah, again, but people didn't know.
Yeah.
People should know now, and it's got to change now. I'm not going to be mad at a coach from the 70s or 80s or even the 90s who used techniques that right now we would not do. I don't think it's fair to be mad at them.
No. Today is what I'm looking at.
They wouldn't have enough to know. But today, yes, these kinds of things should not be happening at all. John clickety-clacking away. That is true, Jason Nix.
Yeah, he is. Heavy fingers, as always.
Yes. It's a challenge for the game, and it's something that the sport has to take very seriously. And I hope that they do. Burns' point about some decision makers not really having the information to take it seriously enough is a scary one and a valid one.
Yep.
The U.S., the U.K., FIFA have to take the leads here and inform properly and help fix this for the future generations. They have to. And a temporary sub is the way that I would go.
Yep.
If you want to add more to that, fine, but a temporary sub would be very, very important for that. Sean Vergara is starting Bad Rumors again. Who are you wanting to come to Atlanta United now, Sean Vergara? Or are you trying to bring Jose Mourinho to Atlanta United? I think he's kind of busy right now leading the Premier League. Doing pretty well in that, too. He ain't coming.
No.
I don't think getting knocked out of the postseason affects Miguel Herrera's future at Club America. Maybe it does. I don't think it does. They finished third in the year. He was one of the top coaches in the year in the league. I don't think he's going anywhere, and I don't think if he does, I just don't think he's coming to MLS yet.
Yeah.
The Colombia possibility has come up for Herrera, but I don't think they have resolved things with Queiroz just yet. I don't know if he would leave Club America to take the Colombia job. I think he would leave the Club America job to take a job in Europe. That's it.
Yeah.
Now, if he gets relieved of his duties at Club America, then we're having a very different discussion.
Yes.
But I don't see that happening. All right. We're going to end it there because we got plenty more to talk about tonight. We will bounce around everything going on with Barcelona, what this new candidate means for the race, what it could mean for their future short and long term. We will look ahead to another week of Champions League and how many more hamstring injuries we will see. There will be more. Europa League, Libertadores, Sudamericana, all of that. We'll have plenty to talk about. I would expect potentially some more announcements by MLS teams about contract decisions today. Be on the lookout for that. We'll keep you posted on all of it tonight. 7 o'clock, same places, on the app, soccerdownhere.net, on Twitch, twitch.tv/soccerdownhere. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back at 7. Mucha platiel.
Mucha platiel.